The morning sun bathed the countryside in a golden glow, its rays spilling over rolling hills dotted with vibrant wildflowers. Emma stood on the porch of their quaint farmhouse, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. She gazed out at the sprawling farm, its rustic charm enhanced by the symphony of chirping birds and the occasional lowing of cattle. This was her sanctuary, a place where every blade of grass seemed to carry the promise of peace. Inside, Liam busied himself with breakfast. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the house as he skillfully flipped eggs in the cast-iron skillet. His tall, broad-shouldered frame moved with practiced ease, and the corners of his mouth lifted in a subtle smile as he heard the soft coos of their 6-month-old son, Noah, from the living room. Noah lay in his bassinet, his cherubic face lit by a morning sunbeam streaming through the window. His tiny fingers grasped at the air, and his deep blue eyes, the exact shade of Liam's, sparkled with curiosity. Emma stepped inside, her heart swelling at the sight of him. She leaned over the bassinet, brushing her finger gently across Noah's cheek, eliciting a giggle that echoed like music through the cozy room. "He's in a good mood today," Emma said, her voice warm and light. "He knows his mama's happy," Liam replied, sliding 2 plates onto the small kitchen table. Their mornings followed a rhythm that felt like poetry. After breakfast, Emma carried Noah to the barn, a place that held an unspoken magic. The barn was a sturdy structure, its weathered wood panels whispering stories of the past. Inside, their animals storied a few cows, some chickens, and their pride and joy, Willow, the chestnut-colored therapy horse with a gentle disposition. Willow was a special presence on the farm. Her large, soulful eyes seemed to hold an intelligence beyond understanding, and her movements were as graceful as a whisper. As Emma approached with Noah in her arms, Willow lifted her head, her ears perking up. She trotted to the edge of her pen, her tail swishing lazily, as if greeting the baby. "Good morning, Willow," Emma murmured, stroking the horse's velvety muzzle. Noah gurgled, his tiny hand stretching toward the horse. Willow responded with a soft nicker, her breath warm and comforting. "She loves him," Liam said, leaning on the barn door with a contented smile. Emma nodded. "It's like she knows he's ours." After settling Noah in his stroller, Emma began her daily chores. The rhythmic swish of hay being spread, the clink of buckets, and the occasional shuffle of animals created a peaceful soundtrack. The farm, with its earthy scents and vibrant life, felt like a world untouched by the chaos of modern life. The couple's relationship was a testament to resilience. Emma had met Liam at a farmer's market years ago. He was selling fresh produce from his family's farm, his easy laughter and genuine kindness immediately drawing her in. Their love blossomed quickly, and they married within a year. When Liam's parents passed away, the farm became their inheritance and their shared dream. Building a life on the farm wasn't easy. The long days of labor, financial uncertainties, and unpredictable weather tested their resolve. But Emma and Liam tackled every challenge together, their love serving as the cornerstone of their lives. When Noah arrived, it felt as if their family was completing a perfect balance of hard work, love, and the unspoken promise of a bright future. As Emma finished her chores, she looked over at Noah, who was now fast asleep in his stroller. Willow stood near him, her large frame casting a protective shadow. It was a simple moment, but it encapsulated everything Emma valued: family, peace, and the profound connection between humans and animals. By mid-morning, Liam joined them outside, a picnic basket in hand. They sat together under the shade of an old oak tree, sharing sandwiches and laughter as Noah stirred awake, his tiny fingers gripping Emma's scarf. Liam picked up his guitarra pastime he rarely indulged in since becoming a father, and strummed a soft melody. Noah's giggles turned into squeals of delight, his eyes wide with fascination at the sounds. "You still got it," Emma teased, nudging Liam's arm. "Only because I have the best audience," Liam replied, winking at Noah. The day unfolded like a dream, each moment steeped in gratitude. Yet, beneath the surface of their happiness lingered a quiet worry. Noah had been quieter than usual in recent weeks. He struggled to move as much as other babies his age, and Emma couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something was amiss. Still, she pushed the thought aside, determined to enjoy the time they had as a family. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Emma and Liam carried Noah back to the house. They settled him into his crib, watching as his chest rose and fell with each tiny breath. Emma lingered, her hand resting on the crib rail, while Liam wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Do you think he's okay?" Emma finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam hesitated, his jaw tightening before he spoke. "I think we'll face whatever comes." Together, his words were a reassurance, but Emma's heart remained heavy. She kissed Noah's forehead and whispered a silent prayer for their son's health. Later that night, as the farmhouse settled into silence, Emma found herself staring out the window at the barn. The faint silhouette of Willow stood against the moonlit fields, her presence as steady and serene as ever. Emma couldn't explain it, but the horse had always seemed to bring a sense of calm, a quiet strength that reminded her to keep going. "Maybe tomorrow will be easier," Emma murmured to herself as she climbed into bed. The day ended as it had begun, with hope woven delicately into the fabric of their lives. But even in the stillness of the night, the winds of change were stirring, and the family's journey was about to take an unexpected turn. The first sign was subtle, easy to dismiss in the blur of sleepless nights and diaper changes. Emma noticed Noah wasn't moving his legs as much as he used to. At first, she attributed it to his sleepy nature. He had always been a calm baby, content to watch the world with his wide, curious eyes. But days turned into weeks, and the moments that once brought joy, like Noah kicking his legs during bath time, became less frequent. Emma's concern grew into quiet dread. One evening, while Liam was bottle-feeding Noah on the couch, she brought it up. "Have you noticed Noah doesn't move his legs much anymore?" she asked, trying to keep her tone light, but failing to hide the crack in her voice. Liam looked down at his son, his brow furrowing as he gently tickled Noah's tiny foot. The baby didn't respond, his legs lying still on the blanket. "I'm sure he's just tired," Liam said after a moment, but the unease in his eyes betrayed his words. Emma nodded, forcing a smile. But as she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the weight of her fears pressed down on her chest. A week later, they sat in the pediatrician's office. Emma held Noah tightly, her fingers trembling as they waited. The room was bright and cheerful, adorned with cartoon posters and toys meant to distract from the seriousness of medical visits. But nothing could ease the knot of anxiety in Emma's stomach. The doctor, a kind woman with silver hair and soft eyes, examined Noah carefully. She asked questions when Emma first noticed the lack of movement, whether there had been any injuries, any unusual symptoms. Emma answered each question with a growing sense of helplessness. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor sat down across from them, her expression grave. "I'd like to run some tests," she said gently. "It could be something neurological. We need more information." The word neurological echoed in Emma's mind like a thunderclap. She barely heard the doctor explain the next steps, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed in front of Noah. Over the next few weeks, they visited specialists, underwent scans, and endured long, silent car rides to hospitals far from their rural home. Each test felt like a tiny needle, pricking away at their hope. Liam stayed strong for Emma, his hand a steady presence on her shoulder, his voice calm and reassuring. But she saw the weariness in his eyes, the weight he carried silently. Finally, the diagnosis came. Noah had a rare neurological condition that disrupted the signals between his brain and his lower body. The doctor explained the details in clinical terms that Emma struggled to grasp through the haze of heartbreak. The bottom line was clear. Noah was paralyzed, and there was no known cure. Emma sat frozen, clutching Noah to her chest, as if holding him tighter could somehow shield him from the words. Liam asked questions practical, grounded questions about therapies, treatments, and long-term care. But Emma couldn't speak. All she could do was stare at her baby, her mind swirling with guilt and despair. Had she done something wrong during her pregnancy? Missed some sign? Failed to act quickly enough? The questions haunted her as they drove home in silence. The farmhouse, once a place of comfort, now felt suffocating. Emma placed Noah in his crib and stood by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. She could see the barn in the distance, its silhouette dark against the fading light. Willow was there, her head poking out of the stall, watching the fields as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Days turned into a blur of appointments and therapy consultations. Emma felt like she was drowning in pamphlets, advice, and well-meaning words from family and friends. Everyone wanted to help, but their optimism felt like a cruel contrast to the reality she faced. Liam, ever the anchor, threw himself into the work of keeping the farm running. He rose before dawn to tend to the animals, his hands blistered and rough from long days of labor. He rarely spoke of his feelings, but Emma could see the strain in his face. The lines of worry etched deeper each day. One night, as Emma rocked Noah to sleep, tears streamed down her face. She whispered to him, her voice breaking, "I'm so sorry, baby. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it better." The next morning, she decided to take Noah to the barn. She didn't know why. Maybe she needed the peace it offered, the quiet reassurance of Willow's presence. She placed Noah's stroller near the pen and sat on a bale of hay, her hands trembling as she watched the horse approach. Willow lowered her head, sniffing at the stroller before nuzzling Noah's tiny hand. The baby stirred, his face breaking into a small smile. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt a flicker of something other than despair. Hope. It was fragile and fleeting, but it was there, ignited by the gentle nudge of a horse that seemed to understand more than Emma could comprehend. The barn had always been Emma's retreat, a place where time seemed to slow down and the world outside faded into whispers. It was her sanctuary even before Noah was born, a space where she felt connected to something greater than herself. But now, the barn had taken on a new role, not just as a place of peace for her, but as a safe haven for her son. The morning sunlight spilled through the wide wooden slats, casting golden beams onto the hay-strewn floor. The air was filled with earthy scents, fresh hay, leather saddles, and the faint sweetness of alfalfa. Emma walked into the barn carrying Noah in her arms, his stroller bumping gently along the uneven ground behind her. He was quiet, his wide eyes scanning the unfamiliar shapes and shadows. Willow, the chestnut mare, immediately perked up at their arrival. She was standing in her pen, her glossy coat shining as she flicked her ears toward Emma and Noah. With a soft nicker, she approached the gate, her large, soulful eyes fixed on the baby as if she understood the weight he carried. Emma set Noah's stroller down near Willow's pen and sat on a bale of hay, her shoulders sagging under the invisible burden she'd been carrying since the diagnosis. The barn felt alive in its own quiet way. The rhythmic clucking of the chickens outside, the soft snorts of the cows in the nearby paddock, and the occasional creak of wood in the gentle breeze created a symphony of calm. "I don't know what to do anymore," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. She wasn't speaking to anyone in particular, but her words seemed to hang in the air, absorbed by the barn's comforting stillness. Willow leaned her head over the gate, her ears twitching as if listening. Emma reached up instinctively, her hand brushing over the horse's velvety muzzle. Willow exhaled softly, her breath warm and steady against Emma's hand. The connection was small but grounding, like a lifeline thrown to someone adrift in a storm. When Emma looked down, she noticed Noah's tiny hand twitching slightly. It wasn't much, just the faintest movement, but it was enough to make her heart skip a beat. "You see her, don't you, Noah?" she murmured, leaning closer to her son. Willow stretched her neck, sniffing curiously at the stroller. Emma watched in awe as the horse gently nudged the edge of the stroller with her nose. The motion so deliberate and careful it felt almost intentional. Noah cooed softly, his face lighting up with a smile that Emma hadn't seen in weeks. "You like her, don't you?" Emma said, her voice tinged with a mix of wonder and relief. For the first time in a long while, she felt something other than despair. This became their routine. Every morning, after Liam left to tend to the fields, Emma would bring Noah to the barn. She'd park his stroller near Willow's pen and sit close by, sometimes reading aloud, sometimes simply soaking in the quiet. Each day, Willow's behavior became more intriguing. The horse seemed drawn to Noah in a way that Emma couldn't explain. One afternoon, as Emma turned away to grab a bottle for Noah, she glanced back to see Willow gently rocking the stroller with her nose. Her movements were slow and rhythmic, almost like a lullaby in motion. Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. She had never seen an animal act so purposefully, so attuned to the presence of a child. When Noah stirred and let out a soft gurgle, Willow stopped immediately, her ears flicking as if to gauge his reaction. Emma stood there for a moment, torn between disbelief and gratitude. She crouched beside the stroller, brushing a hand over Noah's cheek. His expression was calm, his eyes fluttering closed as if lulled to sleep by the horse's touch. "It's like you know what he needs," Emma whispered to Willow, her voice trembling. The horse blinked at her, unhurried and serene, as if to say, "I do." Over the weeks, Emma noticed subtle but undeniable changes. Noah began moving his fingers more frequently, his hands occasionally gripping the fabric of his blanket. He seemed more engaged, his eyes following the gentle sways of Willow's tail or the rise and fall of her head. Emma started keeping a journal, noting every small improvement with a mixture of hope and cautious optimism. One evening, after a particularly long day, Liam joined them in the barn. He leaned against the gate, watching as Willow sniffed at Noah's hand. "She's got a way about her, doesn't she?" he said, his voice low and contemplative. Emma nodded. "I think she's helping him, Liam. I don't know how, but I can feel it." Liam didn't reply right away, his eyes fixed on his son. Finally, he said, "If it's working, then we keep doing it. Whatever it takes." The barn, once just a place for storing hay and housing animals, had become the center of their lives. It was where Emma felt hope rekindle, where Liam allowed himself to believe in the impossible, and where Noah began to show glimpses of the strength hidden within him. As Emma carried Noah back to the house that evening, she glanced over her shoulder at Willow, who stood silently in her pen, her head lowered as if in quiet contemplation. "Thank you," Emma whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to the horse, the barn, or the universe itself. The morning was unusually quiet. The sky, painted in muted hues of gray and blue, seemed to reflect Emma's subdued mood as she pushed Noah's stroller across the uneven path toward the barn. The familiar crunch of gravel beneath the wheels was oddly comforting, a small reminder of her daily routine. Inside the barn, Willow stood waiting, her chestnut coat gleaming softly in the dim light filtering through the wooden slats. "Good morning, Willow," Emma murmured, her voice barely audible over the faint rustling of hay. Willow nickered softly, her ears swiveling toward Emma and Noah as they approached. Emma parked the stroller near Willow's pen and sat down on a bale of hay, her hands resting on her lap. The weight of the past weeks hung heavy on her shoulders. She had been trying to stay hopeful, documenting every tiny movement Noah made, every fleeting smile, but progress felt painfully slow. Still, she couldn't shake the sense of peace that settled over her in the barn, especially when Willow was near. As if sensing Emma's unease, Willow stepped closer to the gate. Her large, expressive eyes seemed to study the baby intently, her breath creating small puffs of mist in the cool air. Noah, snug in his stroller, was unusually fussy that morning. His soft cries filled the barn, and Emma sighed, leaning over to adjust his blanket. "It's okay, baby," she said softly, brushing her hand over Noah's forehead. "Mama's here," but nothing she did seemed to soothe him. Noah squirmed, his tiny face scrunching in discomfort, and Emma's chest tightened with helplessness. She looked at Willow, who stood motionless, her ears flicking slightly. Then, To Emma's astonishment, the horse extended her neck and gently nudged the edge of the stroller with her nose. Emma froze, her breath catching as she watched. Willow's movements were deliberate and impossibly gentle. She nudged the stroller again, rocking it in a slow, rhythmic motion. Noah's cries began to soften, his wriggling slowing as the stroller swayed back and forth. Within moments, he was quiet, his eyelids fluttering closed as he drifted into a peaceful sleep. Emma's hand flew to her mouth, her heart pounding. She stared at Willow, who now stood still, her head tilted slightly as if to ensure the baby was truly at ease. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but they weren't born of sadness this time. They were tears of awe, of gratitude, of something she couldn't quite put into words. Did you do that on purpose?" she whispered, her voice shaking. Willow blinked at her, calm and steady, as if the answer was obvious. Emma couldn't move for a moment, overwhelmed by what she had just witnessed. It wasn't just the act itself, it was a profound care with which Willow had approached her son, the almost human understanding in her actions. She reached out to stroke the horse's muzzle, her touch light and reverent. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The barn felt different that day, as if it had transformed into a place where the extraordinary was possible. Emma sat in silence for a long time, watching Noah sleep, his chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Willow remained close, her presence as comforting as a warm blanket on a cold day. When Liam returned home later that afternoon, Emma couldn't wait to tell him. She practically dragged him to the barn, her words tumbling out in a breathless rush. "You have to see this," she said, her eyes bright with a mix of excitement and disbelief. Liam followed her, his expression skeptical but curious. Emma positioned Noah's stroller near Willow's pen and waited. She wasn't sure if the moment could be recreated, but her instincts told her it would. Willow didn't disappoint. The horse stepped forward, nuzzling the stroller just as she had that morning. She began rocking it gently, her movements steady and soothing. Liam's jaw dropped. "I'll be damned," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. He crouched beside the stroller, watching as Noah's tiny fingers twitched in his sleep. This is incredible." Emma nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I think she's helping him, Liam. I don't know how, but she's doing something." Liam stood, his face a mixture of wonder and determination. "Then we keep her close. Whatever she's doing, we don't stop it." Over the next few days, Emma and Liam became more attuned to Willow's behavior. They noticed how she seemed to sense Noah's moods, responding with either gentle nudges or quiet stillness, depending on his needs. Each time she rocked the stroller, Noah seemed calmer, his tiny hands occasionally grasping at the blanket as if trying to hold on to something. Emma began documenting everything in a journal, every movement, every smile, every moment of peace that Willow seemed to bring. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew it was significant. The bond between her son and the horse was unlike anything she had ever seen. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Emma stood in the barn, watching Willow nuzzle Noah's hand. The baby stirred, a small, sleepy smile playing on his lips. In that moment, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in weeks, a glimmer of hope, fragile but real. The first miracle had happened, and Emma couldn't shake the feeling that it was only the beginning. The days following Willow's remarkable act felt lighter, as if the air itself carried a newfound sense of possibility. Emma and Liam fell into a quiet rhythm, one that revolved not just around caring for Noah, but also nurturing the bond between their son and the horse who had brought them a spark of hope. Every morning, Emma wheeled Noah to the barn. She had come to rely on these moments of calm, where the worries of the outside world melted into the steady cadence of barn life. Each time, Willow greeted them with the same gentle nicker, her large eyes soft and attentive. She seemed to know when Noah was awake, leaning her head over the gate to peer at him, her breath warm against his tiny face. It was during one of these mornings that Emma noticed something new. As she placed Noah in his stroller and turned to adjust his blanket, She caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of her eye. She froze, heart pounding, and turned back to see Noah's fingers curling slightly around the edge of the blanket. It wasn't much, just the smallest of grass, but it was something. Emma gasped, dropping to her knees beside the stroller. "Noah," she whispered, her voice trembling. She gently touched his hand, watching as his tiny fingers twitched again, this time more deliberately. Her heart raced as she called for Liam, who was outside repairing the fence. He came running, wiping his hands on his jeans. "What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "Look," Emma said, her voice a mix of excitement and disbelief. She pointed at Noah's hand, which was now resting still on the blanket. For a moment, Liam said nothing, but then Noah's fingers twitched once more, curling slightly as if in response to the sound of his parents' voices. Liam's face softened, his expression shifting from concern to wonder. That's new," he said, crouching beside the stroller. He reached out and gently touched Noah's other hand. "Do it again, buddy." Noah didn't move right away, but as Willow let out a soft snort from her pen, the baby stirred. His fingers curled again, this time gripping the edge of the blanket with more intention. Emma and Liam exchanged a look, their unspoken hope filling the space between them. The days that followed brought more moments like this, small, fleeting signs that Noah was beginning to respond. Each time it happened, Emma felt her chest tighten with a mixture of joy and disbelief. She began keeping meticulous notes in her journal, tracking every movement, every sound, every smile that seemed to bloom more frequently on Noah's face. One afternoon, as Emma watched Willow nuzzle Noah's hand through the stroller, she noticed something even more surprising. Noah's head turned slightly toward the horse, his wide eyes following Willow's movements. It was the first time Emma had seen him show such clear engagement with his surroundings. "Liam," she called again, her voice echoing through the barn. When Liam appeared, slightly out of breath, she pointed at Noah. "Look at him. He's watching her." Liam leaned over the stroller, his hands on his knees. "He is," he said, his voice filled with quiet awe. "He's really watching her." The couple stood there for a long moment, their eyes fixed on their son. Willow remained still, her head lowered as if she understood the significance of the moment. Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek, but this time it wasn't born of sadness. It was hope, fragile, delicate, but undeniably real. As Noah continued to show small signs of improvement, word began to spread among their neighbors. People in the community started visiting the farm, curious about the connection between the baby and the horse. At first, Emma was hesitant to share the story. It felt too personal, too sacred to put into words. But as more people came, she realized that Noah and Willow's bond was inspiring others in ways she hadn't expected. One visitor, an older woman named Margaret, watched in silence as Willow leaned her head toward Noah, her nose brushing gently against his hand. "Animals have a way of healing us," Margaret said softly. "Sometimes in ways we can't explain." Emma nodded, her eyes fixed on her son. "She's doing something," she said. "I don't know what it is, but she's helping him." Margaret placed a hand on Emma's shoulder. "Trust in it. Sometimes we don't need to understand miracles. We just need to believe in them." The family began to embrace the small community that formed around them, drawing strength from the support and kindness of others. Liam, who had always been reserved about sharing their struggles, started opening up. He spoke about the challenges they faced and the hope that Willow had brought into their lives. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emma sat in the barn with Noah in her lap. Willow stood nearby, her ears twitching as she listened to the quiet hum of the farm settling down for the night. Emma leaned down and kissed Noah's forehead. "You're getting stronger," she whispered. "I can see it. I can feel it." Willow nickered softly, her head turning to look at the baby. Emma smiled, her heart full. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a future where Noah could move freely, where his laughter echoed across the fields as he played alongside the animals. It was a dream, fragile and distant, but no longer impossible. And it was all because of the small signs of hope, each one a reminder that even the tiniest progress could light the way forward. It started with a few curious neighbors stopping by the farm. Word of Noah and Willow's unusual bond had spread quietly through the community, whispered from one family to the next over dinner tables and morning coffee. At first, the visitors were kind people from church, old friends, and even the local postman came by to offer encouragement. They wanted to see the miracle with their own eyes. Emma welcomed them cautiously, finding comfort in their support. But then the visitors changed. One afternoon, as Emma sat in the barn watching Willow gently nuzzle Noah's outstretched hand, a sleek black car pulled up to the edge of the property. The door opened, and a sharply dressed man stepped out, his shoes crunching on the gravel driveway. His presence felt out of place, his crisp suit stark against the backdrop of the farm's rustic simplicity. "Hello there," he called out, his voice smooth but commanding. "I'm Mr. Carter. I heard about your remarkable horse and your little boy." Emma stood, her instincts immediately on alert. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. "I represent a therapy center in the city," he said, flashing a polished smile. "We're always on the lookout for exceptional animals to join our program. From what I've heard, your horse, Willow, might just be the perfect fit." Emma's stomach twisted. "She's not for sale," she said quickly, her hands gripping the stroller handle. Mr. Carter's smile didn't falter. "I understand, Mrs. Hayes, but you should know that animals like Willow are rare. She could help hundreds, maybe thousands of children. I'm willing to make you a generous offer." Emma shook her head firmly. "Willow is part of our family. She's not going anywhere." Carter's eyes narrowed slightly, though his tone remained pleasant. "Think it over," he said, handing her a business card. "Call me if you change your mind." As the man drove away, Emma's heart raced. She glanced at Willow, who stood calmly in her pen, oblivious to the growing storm. A sense of unease settled over her like a heavy fog. She knew that the attention they were receiving wasn't all well-meaning. That evening, Emma told Liam about the encounter. His jaw tightened as she recounted Carter's words, and his hands clenched into fists. "They're not taking her," he said, his voice firm. "I don't care how much money they offer." Emma nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "I just don't understand why people can't leave us alone. She's helping Noah. Isn't that enough?" Liam pulled her into a hug, his arms strong and steady around her. "We'll protect her, whatever it takes." But the attention didn't stop. Over the next few days, strangers began showing up at the farm, some uninvited. Cars would slow down as they passed the property, and people with cameras lingered by the fence, snapping photos of the barn. Emma felt like they were living under a microscope, their private life turned into a spectacle. One morning, while Liam was out in the fields, Emma noticed a man with a camera crouching near the barn. She stepped outside, her heart pounding with anger and fear. "Can I help you?" she called out, her voice sharp. The man straightened, looking startled. "I'm just here for a story," he said, holding up his camera as if it were a shield. "People are fascinated by what's happening here." "This is private property," Emma said firmly, taking a step toward him. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The man hesitated, then muttered something under his breath before walking back to his car. Emma stood there, watching him go, her hands trembling. She felt vulnerable, exposed, like the walls of her sanctuary had been torn down. When Liam returned that evening, she told him about the photographer. His expression darkened. "This has gone too far," he said. "I'm putting up a no trespassing sign tomorrow." But even as they tried to protect their home, the situation escalated. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail, stamped with the logo of the therapy center Carter had mentioned. Inside was an official offer more money than Emma and Liam had ever seen for Willow. Along with the offer came a thinly veiled threat. If they didn't comply, the center would report them to animal welfare authorities, claiming the farm wasn't suitable for housing a horse with such therapeutic potential. Emma's hands shook as she read the letter aloud to Liam. "They're trying to scare us," she said, her voice breaking. "They're trying to take her away." Liam's jaw clenched. "Let them try," he said, his voice like steel. "We're not giving her up." The couple decided to reach out to their community for help. They called neighbors, friends, and even a local vet, explaining the situation. To their relief, people rallied around them, offering support and reassurance. "Willow belongs here," Margaret, the older neighbor who had visited before, said firmly. "We won't let them take her." Still, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were fighting a battle much bigger than themselves. Late at night, as the house settled into silence, she would sit by Noah's crib, watching him sleep. She wondered how far they would have to go to protect Willow and the fragile hope she had brought into their lives. As she looked out the window toward the barn, she saw Willow's silhouette in the moonlight, standing tall and steady. The sight gave her strength. No matter what challenges lay ahead, Emma knew one thing for certain. They would fight for Willow, just as Willow was fighting for Noah. Emma leaned against the barn gate, the morning sun casting long shadows across the dew-covered grass. In her hand was a notebook filled with research on equine therapy, scribbled notes, printed articles, and highlighted passages. The idea had come to her during another sleepless night, scrolling through online forums and medical studies. If Willow was helping Noah without structured guidance, perhaps they could amplify the effects through intentional therapy techniques. She turned to Liam, who was busy tightening a loose hinge on the barn door. "What if we tried some exercises with Willow and Noah?" she asked, her voice tentative but hopeful. "I've been reading about equine therapy, and it's incredible what animals can do for kids with disabilities." Liam wiped his hands on his jeans and looked at her. "You really think it could work?" Emma nodded. "It's already working in its own way. If we can build on that, who knows what's possible?" Liam considered her words for a moment before nodding. "Let's try it. We've got nothing to lose." That afternoon, they set up a small area in the barn for their sessions. Emma placed soft mats on the ground near Willow's pen, creating a safe, inviting space for Noah. She brought out toys and brightly colored scarves, hoping to engage the senses. Liam rigged a simple ramp and platform, allowing them to bring Noah closer to Willow without straining their backs. When everything was ready, Emma carried Noah to the barn, his wide eyes darting around at the familiar sights and sounds. Willow stood patiently by the gate, her ears flicking as if in anticipation. Emma placed Noah on the mat, propping him up with pillows to support his head and back. "Okay, buddy," she said softly, holding his tiny hand. "Let's see what you can do." She started small, guiding Noah's hand toward Willow's muzzle. The horse lowered her head, her breath warm and steady against his fingers. Noah's hand twitched, and Emma gasped as his fingers curled slightly, brushing against Willow's nose. "That's it, Noah," Emma said, her voice trembling with excitement. "You're doing it." Liam, who had been watching from the corner, stepped closer. "He's responding to her," he said, his voice filled with wonder. Encouraged by the progress, Emma decided to introduce more sensory activities. She draped one of the brightly colored scarves over Willow's back, then gently guided Noah's hand to touch the fabric. The baby's eyes widened as his fingers brushed the soft material. For the first time, he let out a small, delighted giggle. Emma and Liam exchanged a look, their hearts swelling with hope. "We're on to something," Liam said, his voice firm with determination. The sessions became a daily ritual. Every morning, Emma would bring Noah to the barn, where Willow awaited them with her calm, steady presence. They worked on simple exercises, like guiding Noah's hands to stroke Willow's coat or encouraging him to reach for toys placed near her. Each day brought small victories, a twitch of a finger, a turn of his head, a soft coo that hinted at growing awareness. One afternoon, Emma decided to take a bold step. With Liam's help, she carefully placed Noah on a padded saddle atop Willow's back. The horse stood perfectly still. Her muscles relaxed as if she understood the importance of her role. Emma held Noah securely, her hands trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. "Are you sure about this?" Liam asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Emma nodded. "I think it'll be okay. Look at how calm she is." As Willow began to take slow, measured steps, something remarkable happened. Noah's body, which had always felt stiff and unresponsive, seemed to relax. His arms hung more naturally at his sides, and his head tilted slightly, as if he were taking in the gentle rhythm of Willow's movements. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "He's so calm," she whispered. It's like he's part of her." Liam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He's connecting with her in a way we can't even understand." The results of their sessions began to show in subtle but undeniable ways. Noah's fingers grew stronger, his grip more intentional. He started responding to sounds with small turns of his head, and his expressions became more animated. Emma documented every milestone in her notebook, her handwriting becoming increasingly hopeful with each entry. Their progress didn't go unnoticed. Margaret, their neighbor, stopped by one morning to drop off a basket of fresh eggs. She watched in awe as Willow nuzzled Noah's hand, the baby letting out a soft giggle. "I've never seen anything like this," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're doing something amazing here, Emma." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "It's not just us. Willow is the one making it possible. Despite the progress, the journey wasn't without its challenges. There were days when Noah seemed tired and unresponsive, his small body stiff and resistant to movement. On those days, Emma felt the weight of doubt creeping in, whispering that they were chasing a dream that might never come true. But each time, Willow's quiet presence reminded her to keep going. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the barn in warm hues of orange and gold, Emma sat with Noah in her lap. Willow stood nearby, her head lowered as if in silent contemplation. Emma ran her fingers through Noah's hair, her voice soft as she whispered, "You're going to get there, my love. One step at a time." The therapy journey had become more than just a routine. It was a lifeline, a source of hope that sustained them through the darkest moments. Emma and Liam knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain, but with Willow by their side, they believed anything was possible. The barn doors creaked open as Dr. Evelyn Harper stepped inside, her footsteps muffled by the hay-strewn floor. She was the local veterinarian, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a voice that carried authority tempered by kindness. Emma had called her to check on Willow, not because the horse seemed unwell, but because Emma wanted reassurance that everything about Willow was as remarkable as it seemed. Dr. Harper approached Willow with practiced ease, her hand outstretched. The horse stood calmly, her ears flicking toward the vet as she let out a soft nicker. Evelyn ran her hands over Willow's coat, inspecting her closely while murmuring soothing words. "She's in excellent health," Dr. Harper said after a few minutes, straightening up. She turned to Emma, a curious glint in her eyes. "But you didn't call me here just to hear that, did you?" Emma hesitated, then shook her head. "There's something special about her, Dr. Harper. She's been helping Noah. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like she knows what he needs. I was wondering if you could tell me more about her past, where she came from." The vet's expression softened as she leaned against the gate, her gaze resting on Willow. "You're right to feel that way. Willow isn't an ordinary horse. She has a history, one that might explain why she's so attuned to your son." Emma leaned in, her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Evelyn crossed her arms, her tone reflective. "Willow was part of a therapy program at a center for children with severe illnesses. I was a vet on call for that center years ago, and I saw firsthand how special she was. She worked with kids who were terminally ill or disabled, and the bond she formed with them was extraordinary. It wasn't just that she was gentle. She seemed to sense what each child needed." Emma's breath caught. "What happened to the program?" Dr. Harper's face clouded with sadness. The center lost funding and had to shut down. Many of the horses were sold off to private owners or farms. I remember Willow the most because of one little boy. His name was Adam. He had cerebral palsy and couldn't walk or speak. But when he was with Willow, he came alive. His parents said she brought out a side of him they'd never seen before. Emma felt a lump form in her throat. What happened to Adam? He passed away a few months after the center closed, Evelyn said quietly. But his parents always believed Willow gave him something precious in his final days: joy, peace, a sense of connection. The barn fell silent except for the occasional rustle of hay. Emma looked at Willow, who stood patiently nearby, her ears flicking toward the sound of their voices. The thought that this remarkable horse had already touched so many lives filled Emma with awe and a renewed sense of purpose. "How did she end up here?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "When the center closed, Willow was sold to a breeder," Evelyn explained. "She had a few foals, but after a while, the breeder decided to retire her. That's when Liam's parents bought her for the farm. I always thought it was a good match. This farm is peaceful, and Willow thrives in environments like this." Emma ran her fingers along the edge of the gate, her mind racing. "Do you think she remembers?" "The kids, the therapy work she used to do." Dr. Harper smiled. "Horses have incredible memories, especially when it comes to emotional connections. I can't say for certain, but I wouldn't be surprised if she still carries those experiences with her. She has a gift, Emma, and from what you've told me, she's using it to help Noah." The conversation stayed with Emma long after Dr. Harper left. That evening, as she sat with Noah in the barn, she couldn't stop thinking about Willow's past. The idea that this horse had brought comfort to other children, just as she was now doing for Noah, felt like a thread connecting them all, a tapestry woven with love, loss, and healing. She shared what she'd learned with Liam over dinner. He listened intently, his fork paused midair as she recounted the story of Adam and the therapy center. "That explains a lot," Liam said finally, his voice thoughtful. "She's not just a horse. She's something else. Like she's meant to be here, with us." Emma nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "It feels like fate, doesn't it? Like she was brought here for a reason." The next day, Emma decided to dig deeper. She reached out to the center where Willow had once worked, hoping to learn more about her time there. After several phone calls, she connected with a former staff member who confirmed everything Dr. Harper had said and shared a few more details. Willow was a favorite among the children, the staff member said. There was one little girl, Sophie, who had severe anxiety. She wouldn't let anyone near her, but with Willow, it was different. She'd sit with her for hours, brushing her coat and whispering secrets. "I've never seen anything like it." As Emma listened, her heart swelled with a mix of emotions: gratitude, wonder, and a deep sense of responsibility. Willow wasn't just a part of their family. She was a healer, a presence that seemed to defy logic and reason. That evening, Emma sat beside Willow in the barn, stroking her coat as Noah dozed in his stroller nearby. "You've been through so much, haven't you?" she murmured. "And yet, here you are, helping us." Helping him. Willow turned her head, her large eyes meeting Emma's. In that moment, Emma felt an unspoken understanding pass between Thema bond forged, not just by circumstance, but by something greater, something she couldn't quite name. As the barn settled into quiet, Emma whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't just for what Willow was doing for Noah, but for everything she had done, for every life she had touched. Emma knew now that this journey wasn't just about her family. It was part of something much larger, a story that had started long before them and would continue long after. And for the first time, she truly believed in miracles. The storm rolled, and suddenly, dark clouds gathering over the horizon like an ominous curtain. Emma stood at the kitchen sink, glancing out the window as the first drops of rain splattered against the glass. The wind picked up, bending the tall grass and rustling the trees that lined the edge of their property. She turned to Liam, who was tightening the windows in the living room. "This storm looks bad," she said, her voice tinged with worry. Liam nodded, pulling the curtains shut. I'll check the barn and make sure everything's secure. You stay inside with Noah. Emma hesitated, her gaze shifting to the baby monitor on the counter. Noah was napping in his crib, his breathing soft and even. She hated storms. They always left her feeling on edge, as if the chaos outside might creep into their lives. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof with relentless force. Thunder cracked in the distance, and Emma flinched, gripping the counter for support. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. Minutes later, Liam returned, drenched from head to toe. The animals are fine, he said, shaking water from his jacket. Willow's calm as always. I swear that horse isn't afraid of anything. Emma smiled faintly, but her unease remained. She checked the baby monitor again, watching Noah's chest rise and fall in rhythmic motion. It was a small reassurance, but it wasn't enough to quiet the storm in her mind. The power flickered once, then went out completely. The house plunged into darkness, save for the faint glow of the stormy sky outside. Emma grabbed a flashlight from the drawer, the beam cutting through the shadows as she moved toward Noah's room. Suddenly, the baby monitor crackled to life, emitting a sharp, garbled sound. Emma froze, her heart racing. She rushed to the crib, the flashlight shaking in her hand. Noah was awake, his tiny face scrunched in discomfort, but something was wrong. His breaths were shallow, his chest rising and falling erratically. Liam, Emma screamed, panic lacing her voice. Liam burst into the room, his eyes wide with alarm. What is it? It's Noah, Emma said, tears streaming down her face. He's not breathing right. Liam leaned over the crib, his hand hovering near Noah's chest. We need to get him to the hospital, he said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Emma nodded, already gathering a blanket to wrap around her son. They rushed to the door, only to be met with a howling wind and torrential rain. The storm had turned their driveway into a river of mud, and the road leading to town was barely visible through the sheets of rain. We can't drive in this, Liam said, his voice heavy with frustration. The truck will get stuck. Emma's hands trembled as she held Noah close. What do we do? She whispered, her voice cracking. For a moment, they stood frozen, the storm raging around them. Then, as if on instinct, Liam's eyes darted toward the barn. Willow, he said, his voice suddenly filled with urgency. She's always calm. Maybe she can help him relax. Emma didn't question him. She clutched Noah tightly as they ran through the rain, their feet slipping in the mud. The barn loomed ahead, its doors swaying in the wind. Liam pushed them open with all his strength, and they stumbled inside, drenched and shivering. Willow was standing in her stall, her head lifted as if she had been expecting them. Her ears flicked toward the sound of their hurried footsteps, and she let out a low nicker, her breath visible in the cool air. Emma approached the horse, her heart pounding. Please, she whispered, tears mixing with the rain on her face. Help him. She placed Noah's bundled form near Willow, her hands trembling as she adjusted the blanket. The horse lowered her head, her warm breath brushing against the baby's face. For a moment, everything seemed to pause: the wind outside, the pounding of Emma's heart, even the storm itself. Then, Willow did something Emma would never forget. She began to hum. It wasn't a sound Emma had ever heard from her before, a deep, rhythmic vibration that seemed to resonate through the barn. The horse rocked her head gently, her eyes half closed as if in a trance. Noah's breathing, which had been shallow and erratic, began to stabilize. His tiny chest rose and fell in sync with the horse's movements, and the tension in his face eased. Emma watched in stunned silence, her hand pressed to her mouth. Liam knelt beside her, his eyes wide with disbelief. Is this really happening?" he whispered. Emma nodded, unable to speak. She reached out to touch Willow's neck, feeling the steady vibration of the hum beneath her fingertips. It was as if the horse was pouring her energy into Noah, calming him in a way that no medicine or machine could. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. By the time Noah's breathing had returned to normal, the storm outside had begun to weaken. The thunder was distant now, the rain softening to a steady patter against the barn roof. Emma sat back on her heels, her body trembling from a mix of relief and exhaustion. "She saved him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Liam placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "She did," he said. "I don't know how, but she did." As the family huddled together in the barn, Willow stood tall and steady, her presence as unshakable as the earth beneath them. Emma looked at the horse, her eyes filled with gratitude. She didn't know if she could ever repay Willow for what she had done, but she knew one thing for certain. This horse wasn't just special. She was extraordinary. By the time the storm cleared, Noah was sound asleep in Emma's arms, his breathing soft and even. The barn was quiet again, the air filled with the scent of rain and hay. Emma leaned her head against Liam's shoulder, her tears finally giving way to a shaky smile. "She's more than we ever thought," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. Liam nodded. "She's our miracle." And in that moment, Emma believed it more than ever. The days following the storm felt like waking from a vivid dream. The memory of Willow's extraordinary act lingered in Emma's mind, filling her with equal parts wonder and disbelief. She couldn't stop replaying the moment in the barn the way the horse had calmed Noah's frantic breathing, the rhythmic hum that seemed to come from deep within her, resonating like a lullaby for his soul. Emma sat by the window with Noah on her lap, his tiny fingers curled around one of hers. The baby was calm, his breathing steady and his face serene. Liam entered the room with a cup of tea, setting it on the table beside her. "He's been so peaceful," Emma said, her voice soft. "It's like something shifted that night." Liam nodded, leaning against the windowsill. "It wasn't just the storm that broke. Something inside him. It feels like it's waking up." Emma looked at her son, hope flickering in her chest. Do you think he's getting better?" Liam placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I don't know, but I think Willow's got something to do with it." That afternoon, Emma decided to take Noah to the barn. She bundled him in a soft blanket and wheeled his stroller down the familiar path. The sun was shining again, the sky a brilliant blue that felt like a promise. Willow was standing in her stall, her ears perking up as Emma approached. "Hello, Willow," Emma said, her voice warm. "We're back." She placed Noah's stroller near the horse and began their usual routine, guiding his hand toward Willow's muzzle. The horse lowered her head, her breath brushing against his fingers. But this time, something remarkable happened. Noah's hand, which had always been limp and unresponsive, twitched with purpose. His tiny fingers stretched outward, brushing against Willow's nose with deliberate motion. Emma gasped, her heart leaping. "Liam," she called, her voice echoing through the barn. Liam came running, his boots thudding against the wooden floor. "What is it?" he asked, his eyes darting between her and the baby. "Look," Emma said, her voice trembling with excitement. She pointed at Noah's hand, which was now moving in slow, deliberate motions. "He's touching her. On his own." Liam crouched beside the stroller, his face a mixture of wonder and disbelief. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "You're doing it. You're really doing it." Noah's hand moved again, this time gripping a small section of Willow's mane. The horse stood perfectly still, her eyes half closed as if she understood the significance of the moment. Emma felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't bother wiping them away. She was too mesmerized by the sight in front of her. Over the next few days, Noah's movements became more frequent and intentional. His hands, once stiff and lifeless, began exploring the world around him. He reached for the toys Emma placed on the stroller tray, his tiny fingers wrapping around the bright-colored blocks with newfound strength. Liam built a small activity table for their barn sessions, and Noah's curiosity blossomed. as he banged his toys against the wooden surface, laughing at the sound they made. "He's coming alive," Emma said one evening, watching Noah as he wiggled his toes against the soft blanket in his stroller. "I can't explain it, but it feels like Willow's energy is flowing into him." Liam smiled, his hand resting on her back. "Whatever it is, it's working. Let's keep going." Encouraged by the progress, Emma decided to introduce new activities. She placed Noah on a padded saddle atop Willow's back, holding him securely as Liam led the horse in slow circles around the barn. The baby's eyes sparkled with delight, his body relaxing into the gentle rhythm of Willow's steps. Emma noticed that his posture, once rigid and slumped, was now more upright, his head tilting with emotion. The breakthrough wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Noah, who had always been a quiet and reserved baby, began to express himself in new ways. He giggled at the sound of Willow's hooves on the barn floor, babbled when the horse nuzzled his cheek, and clapped his hands when Emma sang to him during their sessions. One afternoon, as Emma guided Noah's hand along Willow's mane, she noticed something that took her breath away. His legs, which had been completely immobile since his diagnosis, twitched ever so slightly. It was the faintest movement, barely perceptible, but it was there. "Liam," she called, her voice filled with urgency and joy. Liam appeared, his face lighting up as Emma pointed to Noah's legs. "Look," she said, her voice trembling. He moved. They both watched in awe as Noah's legs twitched again, this time with more intention. Emma felt a surge of hope that she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. "It's happening," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "He's waking up." The following weeks brought more milestones. Noah began kicking his legs in response to Emma's voice, reaching for toys with both hands, and turning his head to follow Willow's movements. Each small victory felt monumental, a testament to the bond that had formed between the baby and the horse. One evening, as the family sat in the barn watching the sunset, Emma turned to Liam. "Do you think this is a miracle?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Liam smiled, his eyes fixed on Noah, who was babbling happily in his stroller. "I don't know what else to call it," he said. "She's brought him back to us." Emma leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart full. For the first time since Noah's diagnosis, she allowed herself to believe in the impossible. The breakthrough wasn't just about Noah's recovery, it was about the strength of love, the power of connection, and the unshakable bond between a child and a horse. And as the barn filled with the soft glow of twilight, Emma knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would change their lives forever. It started with a knock on the door. Emma was sitting by the window, watching Noah play with his blocks in his stroller, when the sound startled her. She glanced at the clock. It was late afternoon, and visitors weren't common at this hour. Liam was outside repairing a section of the barn roof, so she scooped up Noah and headed to the door. Standing on the porch was Margaret, their neighbor, holding a plate of freshly baked cookies. Her kind eyes were bright with excitement. "I heard about what's been happening with Noah," she said, stepping inside as Emma invited her in. "And with Willow." Emma nodded, adjusting Noah in her arms. "It's been incredible. I can't explain it, but she's changed everything for us." Margaret placed the cookies on the table and reached out to gently touch Noah's hand. "Word is spreading," she said. "People are talking about the miracle on your farm. It's giving everyone hope." Emma blinked, surprised. She hadn't realized how much their story had resonated beyond the farm. "I didn't think people would care that much." "Oh, they care," Margaret said firmly. "And not just about the miracle. They care about you, about keeping Willow safe." Margaret explained that there had been murmurs in the community about the therapy center's attempts to take Willow. People were angry at the thought of their neighbors being pressured to give up a horse that had become a symbol of healing and hope. "We've decided to help," Margaret added. "You're not alone in this." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she hugged Margaret. "Thank you," she whispered. "It means more than I can say." Over the next few days, Emma and Liam began to see the community's support in action. Margaret had been right. People cared deeply about what was happening on the farm. Letters of encouragement arrived in the mail. Neighbors stopped by with meals and supplies, and someone even anonymously paid off their feed bill at the local supply store. One afternoon, a group of neighbors gathered in the barn to discuss how they could help. Liam stood by the gate, his arms crossed as he listened to their suggestions. "We can start a petition," suggested John, a retired teacher who lived down the road. "Make it clear that Willow belongs here. And we'll talk to the press," added Helen, who ran the local bakery. "People need to know what this family is going through." Emma watched in awe as the group brainstormed ideas. She had always thought of their community as kind but reserved. Now, she saw a fierce loyalty that she hadn't expected. These people weren't just neighbors, they were family. The petition gained traction quickly. Margaret printed copies and distributed them at the grocery store, the post office, and even church. Within days, they had hundreds of signatures, each one a testament to the community's belief in the importance of keeping Willow on the farm. Meanwhile, Helen arranged for a local journalist to visit the farm and write a feature story. The reporter arrived with a camera, his notepad in hand, as he interviewed Emma and Liam about their journey. Emma was nervous at first, unsure if she could put into words the profound connection between Noah and Willow. But as she spoke, the words flowed naturally, filled with the emotion and gratitude she felt every day. "She's not just a horse," Emma told the reporter, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "She's part of our family. She saved our son in ways we never thought possible." The article, published in the town's newspaper, drew even more attention to the family story. Soon, donations began pouring in to support the farm. Some came with handwritten notes of encouragement, while others simply read. For Willow, each envelope felt like a lifeline, a reminder that they weren't alone in this fight. One evening, as Liam was stacking hay in the barn, a familiar black car pulled into the driveway. Emma's stomach churned as she saw Mr. Carter step out, his polished shoes crunching on the gravel. He approached with his usual air of confidence, but this time, Liam met him halfway. "You've got a lot of nerve showing up here again," Liam said, his voice low and firm. Carter smirked, holding up a piece of paper. "I wanted to show you this," he said, handing it to Liam. "It's a cease and desist letter. Your little petition? It's making my organization look bad. This is your last warning." Liam didn't even glance at the paper before tearing it in half. "You can take your warnings and leave," he said, stepping closer. "Willow's staying right here." The confrontation seemed to shift something in Carter. For the first time, his smug demeanor faltered. He glanced at the barn, where a group of neighbors had gathered, their presence a silent but powerful statement. He muttered something under his breath before retreating to his car and driving away. Emma, who had been watching from the porch, let out a shaky breath as Liam approached. "Do you think he'll come back?" she asked. Liam shook his head. "Not with the whole town behind us." That night, as the family gathered in the barn with their neighbors, Emma looked around at the faces of the people who had rallied to their side. She thought about all the times she had felt alone since Noah's diagnosis, the days when hope had seemed like a distant dream. Now, she saw that hope reflected in the eyes of everyone around her. Margaret raised a glass of homemade lemonade, her voice ringing out in the quiet barn. "To Willow," she said, "and to miracles." The group cheered, their voices echoing off the wooden beams. Emma smiled, holding Noah close as he let out a happy coo. For the first time in a long time, she felt a deep, unshakable certainty. With the support of their community, they could face anything that came their way. The summer sun bathed the farm in golden light, its warmth a gentle reminder of how far they had come. The air buzzed with the hum of cicadas, and a soft breeze carried the scent of wildflowers from the meadow. Emma stood by the barn, watching Liam set up a picnic table near the oak tree. Today wasn't just another day on the farm, it was a celebration. Friends, neighbors, and family had gathered to mark the progress Noah had made and to honor the horse that had helped make it possible. Willow stood nearby, her chestnut coat gleaming in the sunlight. She wore a garland of daisies around her neck, a playful touch added by Margaret earlier that morning. The horse seemed unbothered by the attention, her calm presence grounding the excited energy of the gathering. Noah sat in his stroller, clapping his hands as Emma handed him a bright red ball. His cheeks were rosy, his eyes bright, and his laughter infectious. Over the past weeks, his progress had astounded everyone. He was reaching for toys, babbling in response to Emma's voice, and even starting to push against the ground with his legs during tummy time. Each milestone felt like a small miracle, a testament to his determination and the bond he shared with Willow. The guests mingled, exchanging stories and laughter as they enjoyed the spread of homemade dishes. Helen had brought a platter of her famous lemon bars, while John entertained the children with tales of his childhood on a farm. Liam moved between the groups, a proud smile on his face as he introduced Noah to anyone who hadn't yet met the baby at the heart of this story. As the afternoon wore on, Emma felt a growing sense of gratitude. She glanced at Willow, who stood quietly near Noah, her ears twitching as if she were listening to the sounds of joy around her. Emma walked over and stroked the horse's neck, her voice soft. "You've given us so much," she whispered. "I don't know how we'll ever thank you." Willow turned her head, her eyes meeting Emma's with a depth of understanding that still took her breath away. Before Emma could say more, she noticed Noah reaching toward Willow, his fingers stretching as if he wanted to touch her. Emma lifted him gently from the stroller, holding him close as she guided his hand to Willow's mane. "You see her, don't you?" Emma said, her voice filled with wonder. Noah giggled, his small hand gripping the strands of Willow's mane. It was such a simple act, yet it carried a profound weight, a symbol of how far he had come. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Liam called everyone to gather near the oak tree. He had set up a small stage made from wooden pallets, and a few chairs were arranged in a semicircle. "We wanted to thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice carrying across the quiet yard. "This farm, this family, wouldn't be what it is without your support." The crowd clapped, their smiles warm and encouraging. Emma stood beside Liam, holding Noah as he wriggled excitedly in her arms. She looked out at the familiar faces Margaret, Helen, John, and so many others who had rallied around them during their most challenging days. "But today is about more than just us," Liam continued. "It's about celebrating the miracles that happen when we come together. And of course, it's about Noah and Willow." At the mention of her name, Willow lifted her head, her ears flicking forward. The crowd chuckled softly, their affection for the horse evident in their expressions. Emma felt a surge of pride as she looked at Noah, who was now reaching out toward Liam's microphone, his curiosity boundless. After the speech, the group dispersed, some returning to the picnic table while others lingered near the barn. Emma decided to let Noah explore a bit, setting him down on a blanket near Willow's pen. He sat propped up by pillows, his hands busy with a small wooden toy. It was then that it happened. Emma turned for just a moment to adjust the blanket when she heard a gasp from Margaret, who was standing nearby. Emma spun around, her heart leaping into her throat as she saw Noah. He was leaning forward, his hands pressing against the ground as he tried to push himself upward. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The chatter of the guests faded, the sounds of the farm disappeared, and all Emma could focus on was her son. Slowly, shakily, Noah lifted himself onto his hands and knees. His legs, which had once been motionless, now moved with tentative purpose. "Oh my God," Emma whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "Liam, look at him." Liam, who had been talking to John by the barn, turned and froze. His face shifted from confusion to pure astonishment as he saw Noah crawling slowly, clumsily, but unmistakably toward Willow. The guests gathered around, their voices a mix of gasps and cheers. Willow stood perfectly still, her head lowered as Noah approached. When he reached her, He placed a small, unsteady hand on her leg, giggling as if he had just accomplished the most extraordinary feat. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she knelt beside her son. "You did it, Noah," she said, her voice trembling. "You did it." Liam joined her, his hand resting on her shoulder as he looked at their son with pride. "That's our boy," he said softly. "He's unstoppable." The crowd erupted into applause, their joy infectious. Margaret wiped her eyes with a handkerchief, and Helen hugged John, her smile brighter than the setting sun. It was a moment none of them would forget, a moment that felt like the culmination of every small miracle that had led them here. As twilight settled over the farm, Emma held Noah close, her heart full. She looked at Willow, who stood quietly nearby, her presence as steady and grounding as ever. "You've given us everything," Emma whispered. "You're our miracle." And as the stars began to the night sky, Emma felt a deep, unshakable certainty. This wasn't the end of their journey. It was only the beginning of a life filled with hope, love, and the extraordinary bond between a child and his horse. The years rolled by, bringing changes that Emma and Liam could never have imagined. The farm, once a quiet haven for their family, had become a symbol of resilience and hope for people far beyond their small community. Visitors now came from across the country, drawn by the story of a paralyzed baby, a horse with an extraordinary gift, and the miracles that had unfolded in the heart of the countryside. Willow remained at the center of it all. Her calm, steady presence was as constant as the rising sun. Now well into her later years, she carried herself with the quiet dignity of one who had witnessed the extraordinary and had played a pivotal role in shaping it. Her stall was adorned with photographs, letters, and tokens of gratitude sent by families inspired by her story. Emma stood in the barn one cool autumn morning, brushing Willow's coat as golden leaves swirled outside. She smiled as she thought about how much had changed. The barn, once a simple shelter for animals, had been transformed into a small equine therapy center. The decision had come after Noah's remarkable recovery, when Emma and Liam realized that what Willow had done for their son could bring hope to others. Noah, now a vibrant 6-year-old, darted into the barn, his laughter echoing against the wooden beams. His once wobbly steps had turned into confident strides, and his boundless energy was infectious. He carried a bundle of carrots in his arms, grinning as he approached Willow. "Here you go, girl," Noah said, holding out the carrots. Willow nuzzled his hand, her soft muzzle brushing against his fingers. Noah giggled, his face lighting up with joy. Emma watched the exchange, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Liam entered the barn, wiping his hands on a towel. "There's a family here to meet Willow," he said, glancing at Emma. "Their little girl just started therapy, and they heard about her story." Emma nodded, her smile widening. "Let's go welcome them." The family stood by the barn's entrancing a young couple and their daughter, who was seated in a wheelchair. Her eyes widened as she saw Willow, her hands clasping the sides of her chair with excitement. Emma knelt beside her, introducing herself and asking the girl's name. "I'm Sophie," the girl said shyly, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma's chest tightened as she remembered another Sophia little girl from Willow's past, who had found comfort in the horse's gentle presence years ago. She shook off the wave of emotion and smiled warmly. "Sophie, would you like to meet Willow?" The girl nodded eagerly, and Liam guided Willow toward her. The horse lowered her head, her breath warm and steady against Sophie's hands as she reached out to touch her. Emma watched as Sophie's face transformed, her initial shyness giving way to a radiant smile. It was a moment Emma had witnessed countless times, yet it never failed to move her. "She has that effect on people," Emma said softly to Sophie's parents. "She makes you believe in possibilities you didn't think existed." As the session continued, Emma stepped outside, taking a moment to reflect. She looked out at the fields, now dotted with new fencing and equipment for therapy sessions. The farm had grown in ways she and Liam had never anticipated, yet it still retained its heart, the warmth and love that had sustained them during their darkest days. A voice interrupted her thoughts. Emma, she turned to see Margaret, now walking with the aid of a cane, but as vibrant as ever. The older woman held a book in her hands, its cover featuring a photograph of Willow and Noah. The title read, Willow's Gift, a story of hope and healing. It's finally published, Margaret said, handing the book to Emma. I thought you should have the first copy. Emma took the book, her fingers tracing the embossed title. She opened it, flipping through pages filled with photographs, testimonials, and the story of how Willow had transformed their lives. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked up at Margaret. It's beautiful, Emma said, her voice trembling. Thank you. Margaret smiled. It's your story, Emma. The world needed to hear it. The book became a symbol of their journey, spreading their story far and wide. People who read it wrote letters, sharing their own struggles and triumphs, and many visited the farm to see the place that had become a beacon of hope. One crisp winter evening, Emma and Liam sat by the fire, watching Noah play with his dog near the hearth. The flickering flames cast a warm glow across the room, and the sound of laughter filled the air. Emma leaned her head against Liam's shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her lips. Do you ever think about how it all started? She asked, her voice soft. The storm, that night in the barn, everything that came after? Liam nodded, his gaze distant but fond. I think about it all the time, how one horse changed everything. Emma smiled, her eyes drifting to the window, where Willow's silhouette was visible in the moonlight. She's more than just a horse. She's a reminder that miracles are real. As the years passed, Willow's legacy only grew. When the time finally came for her to rest, the entire community gathered to honor her. A small plaque was placed in the barn, inscribed with the words, Willow, a gift of healing and hope. Noah, now a teenager, stood beside the plaque, his eyes glistening as he traced the letters with his fingers. She saved me, he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. And she saved so many others. Emma wrapped an arm around him, her heart full despite the ache of loss. She'll always be with us, she said, in everything we do. The farm continued to thrive, its mission expanding to help more children and families. Emma and Liam found joy in watching others experience the same transformation they had witnessed with Noah. And though Willow was no longer there in body, her spirit remained, woven into the very fabric of the farm and the lives she had touched. As Emma stood in the barn one evening, listening to the soft sounds of the animals settling in for the night, she felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that the story of Willow and Noah wasn't just their story, was a legacy that would endure, inspiring hope for generations to come.